MrBeats lived in a secluded cabin at the foot of a mountain, far from the town. Though he was known for his crazy online projects, very few people actually knew who he really was. He was a content creator, but not just an ordinary one. As his fame grew, so did the dark secret that haunted him. One night, during a heavy storm, he found an envelope at his door. There was no name or address on it. Inside, there was a single sentence written: "The grand prize night is approaching, but this time the game will play with you." MrBeats smiled. He thought it was a joke. But as soon as he read the note, he felt a chill in the room. His computer screen suddenly went black, and a flickering message appeared. "There's a game you started but never finished. Let's start again." His ears began to ring, as if a whisper from deep within surrounded his entire body. The voice seemed familiar, but from where? Then he remembered. Years ago, while making a real or fiction video, he had researched an old game rumored to be cursed. He had downloaded and started playing it, but stopped halfway through due to strange occurrences. Now, years later, the game had returned. When MrBeats reloaded the game on his computer, a strange figure appeared on the screen. The figure had a dark mask and twisted hands, staring directly at him. A cold, metallic voice came from the screen. "If you don't win this game, your real life will end too." MrBeats had become a part of the game. The game was blurring the line between the virtual and the real world, and every move he made was changing the course of his life. As time passed, it became harder to distinguish reality from the game. Even in his dreams, he encountered that dark figure, fighting to avoid its trap. But one thing was certain: if he didn't finish the game, he wouldn't just lose his internet career, he would lose his life. The final move was approaching. When MrBeats reached the last level of the game, his heart was pounding. On the screen, the dark figure was no longer just an image. It moved as if it were a living being. With each step, it seemed like it was going to emerge from the screen. For the final task, he had to make a choice: salvation or surrender. The choice appeared on the screen as two buttons. The salvation button was glowing brightly, while surrender radiated a cold and dark energy. But everything had become so real throughout the game that MrBeats wasn't even sure if he was still playing a game. The world around him had changed, and strange shadows had appeared in his house. As his eyes locked on the buttons, a message slid from the corner of the screen. "The wrong choice means eternal closure." Whispers began to rise in his head. He remembered something the game's creator had once said: "This is not just a game, it's a closing ritual. If you lose, you won't just lose this world, you'll lose the other one too." MrBeats hesitated. What would happen if he pressed the salvation button? What if it changed his real life forever? But the surrender button seemed to guarantee that he would lose everything. Yet, a dark suspicion gnawed at him. What if the figure, which had been watching him since the beginning, had been lying about his true salvation? With his lips dry and his hands trembling, he reached for the surrender button. But just then, a sound echoed from inside his cabin. Something was moving outside the computer, in the real world. When he turned around, he saw that the figure had now stepped out of the computer screen. The dark entity was emerging from the shadows, stepping closer to him. Panicking, he turned back to his computer. Closing his eyes, he made his final move and pressed salvation. Everything went silent. The computer shut down, and the cabin plunged into darkness. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, a whisper echoed right by his ear. "Wrong choice, but you can start the game again." When MrBeats opened his eyes, he found himself back at his computer, staring at the first screen of the game. It was as if no time had passed. But there was one difference. The world around him had blurred, and reality and the virtual world had merged. Everything was in a loop. He was now trapped inside this game, and there was no way out. The only remaining sound in the cabin was the dark laughter that echoed every night, along with a repeated whisper in the endless loop: "You will never escape again." MrBeats was now doomed to be the prisoner of this cursed game forever.